Greetings, my fellow sovereigns. This is the Vocational Science Freedom Saturday Night Civics and Sovereignty class. Open up the document U.S.A, the Republic that no one lives in. And again, I put this link here in chat tonight, so all you have to do is just scroll up a little bit and just grab it. And I'll open that up and start to read from it. So this is a work by these two gentlemen who I do not know, but this was one of the first documents that I ever came across that really explained the system in a very straightforward, simple way and gave me clues as to what they were doing, which then allowed me to do deeper dives into various different parts of what the index of this document is. So, if the introduction, communalism raises its ugly head, private law and public municipal law, federalism, 14th Amendment, expatriation, losing the law, jurisdiction of the 14th Amendment, real property, take back your estate, be your own lawyer, political action groups, divine right of kings, democracy and communism, Roman civil law, the two federalisms, separation of church and state, public policy and the democracy, private money, your will was probated. This was the first place that I started to realize that everything's being run through probate and how they're doing it. Now, he doesn't get into it, or these gentlemen, I should say, do not get into the subject as deeply as I do. It was just a snippet, and I think it was only a couple paragraphs out of this document, but it gave me at least a clue as to where to look. And then that's what kind of drove me into finding all of the rest of the information about what they're doing, as far as the fact that our states are being probated, and all that these private for-profit courts are doing is they're administering the res, or the things, of infants' abandoned estates. That's what they're doing. But this was the first document that made me realize that is what they were doing, and then I fleshed out the rest of it, which is, of course, in the rest of the VSOF classes online, on both Odyssey and on YouTube. It's pure law. This is where he talks about the common law. What you have lost, what you have gained. This is what he talks about when you actually switch over, when you do go back to being in the republic and not in the democracy, which is exactly what we do with the Vocational Science Freedom status doc set, particularly one document, which is the Declaration of Nationality. And then he gets in the Constitution and then the postscript. So without further ado, I will just begin with the introduction. Our republic is now celebrating the 200th birthday of the Bill of Rights to our Constitution. Through the wisdom of a few free-thinking men, we have come incredibly far in 200 years. Our nation has been blessed with prosperity more than any other in the world. The technology in this country compares with no other. Our leadership in world politics and economics has no rival. Yet, all this has happened outside the quote-unquote house our predecessors on this continent designed and built. This fantastic and majestic political building, which our forefathers constructed with their lives in sacred honor, has fallen into disuse and now sits empty. When it was new, it was the most beautiful mansion in all the world. There was nothing else like it, for it was built on a foundation called, quote-unquote, the common law. The walls were shaped in liberty by a unique arrangement referred to as the separation of powers, and its roof was made of transparent material to let in the light of the law, so that all-encompassing it is adaptable to any people regardless of color, race, creed, or religion. It didn't crumble overnight. What took place was the result of a delusion, for people would never give up liberty knowingly, only through deception. Gradually, the deceptive rot took hold. One by one, the citizens of the house called the Republic moved out for a third-rate structure called a democracy. Napoleon said, "History is a fable agreed upon," because he knew that history repeats itself, especially when the history lessons have not been learned or remembered, which is precisely why I created the Vocational Science of Freedom to begin with, to make sure that all of this knowledge that we amass is not lost, it is kept, and it is all in one place, even if the library is extensive. And it would take you years to go through, because it has definitely taken me over 2 decades to amass it. So, to continue. Thus our history lessons have fallen into disrepair. Our forefathers founded this nation because they believed They had a God-given right to walk away from enslavement to the king. Yet, very bondage they walked away from has opened the door for the most subtle slavery this world has ever known. So subtle is this slavery that the citizens are entrapped by their own ignorance through offers of enticements called economic benefits. Acceptance of these benefits sets us into operation rules and laws that operate outside the Constitution, and thus we have the largest and most unmanageable bureaucracy that has ever existed. A bureaucracy bogged in debt because it has taught its people that government is the provider and problem solver instead of one people, meaning us, the subjects that used to live in that special mansion known as the Republic, lighted in law. The people's freedom has been lost more because of what they haven't done than what they have done. In the pages that follow, you are going to discover why you are an economic slave and what you can do about the U.S.A., the Republic. Yes, you can move back into that mansion known as the Republic, for that is what this treatise is about, finding your key to liberty. Always remember that you are the only one that can take back your liberty. And that's a good point. You are also, and I'll pause to make a point here, the reason you're the only one that can do it and no one else can do it for you, meaning no guru out there, Anna von Reitz isn't going to save you. No one can do it but you for a very, very specific reason. And that reason is that only you are the sole lawful heir of your own estate. And an estate, the substantive definition of the word estate, means everything that a man or woman owns in law. That is your estate. And because this system labels you as an infant under Title I, United States Code, subsection 8, under the definition of person, you will find that all persons are infants. And an infant cannot hold title. An infant only has the right to use the thing, but the real title, the legal title, if you will, is held by their master, or better put, basically their custodian. And what you have to do is rebut that presumption of being an infant, which is what is done through the Vocational Science Freedom Status Doc set with a proof of life and proof of age inquest. And then you must what's called sue out your livery, which is to take back what is being administered by your custodian or guardian, whichever way you want to look at it. So to continue, no one else can do this for you, for the reasons just mentioned. You can and you must act independently of the masses. You and the law are capable of awesome accomplishments in liberty. That is why Thomas Jefferson's statement in the Declaration of Independence is as important today as it was in 1776. It is their, meaning your, right, it is their, your duty, to provide new guards for your future security, and such is now the necessity which constrains them, you, to alter their, your, former system of government. So one man with the law is a majority. This is the most important understanding of the difference between being in a republic and being in a democracy. In a republic, one man with the law is a majority. In a democracy, it doesn't matter. 51%, or basically the legislature, will tell you what your rights are. And those rights are called civil rights because they're under Roman civil law. But we'll get to that. Divine right of kings. Human enslavement has taken all sorts of forms since the beginning of time. The most insidious form is when one individual, such as a king, claims that God gave him the right of enslavement. This is called the divine right of kings. At the root of this assumed right is basic feudal slavery. The divine right the King of England claimed was the right to have absolute authority over every one of his subjects so they could not leave his political religious jurisdiction. That is, the king's subjects did not have the right to expatriate, according to his assumed divine right over them. And just to make a note here, this all stems from the priest class. So the cult of Rome says, we will ordain you and give you this divine right, but only if you're a good boy. So that's the priest class then controlling the king, which these gentlemen do get into later in the document, so I'll just leave it at that. The American Revolution of 1776 was the result of individuals who believed that the king did not have the right to prevent the people from leaving his political religious jurisdiction. The revolution was fought over liberty of choice. Our Constitution is the political document that resulted from that struggle, and it guarantees our liberty to choose the political domain we want to be controlled by without compelled performance. I would also make a note here that it's not the first document. The first thing that we created, or the Founding Fathers created, were the Articles of Confederation. And it took a little under 4 years for the Articles of Confederation to be created and for all of the states to agree on them. It took a false flag situation, which was called Shays' Rebellion, and Washington stomping in there with his personal army to quote-unquote put down the rebellion, to then foment and push through the Constitution that we know, the document that came after the Articles of Confederation, in about 6 months with Washington and Hamilton's help, because that's what they wanted. They wanted a capacity to create a trust in a way that the trust could be bloated and then blown up and destroyed, more or less, which is what happened in the Civil War. But that's spanning a lot of time in history, so I will just leave it at that the creation of the Constitution and what happened just before it is a history that very few people understand. But to continue. Therefore, if we want to move from one political jurisdiction to another, we are guaranteed that right, called expatriation. We are guaranteed the right to change our political territory anytime we desire. Few are aware today that their political choice has been made for them, and it's a political choice that has taken away their absolute rights under the Constitution and its first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights. They are unaware that they were given at birth an economic privilege of an alternative political domain, allowed by the Constitution, but operating outside of it. An alternative domain that operates with the same divine right of kings as did the King of England. Thus, the Constitution is operating as an economic capacity rather than a political one. When we ponder why our nation is in the midst of an economic crisis, like we've never seen before, we cannot understand. This, of course, was written in 2003, and it still holds true today because the hyperinflation that's going on now is far worse than it was then. But anyway, to continue. We cannot understand it is the result of our ignorance. Ignorance of how our silence has given our federal government and its political subdivisions called states, capital S, states, permission to tax its people without representation and confiscate their property when they do not go along with the statutes, acts, ordinances, and codes, especially the tax laws. Ignorance that has allowed our federal government and its political subdivisions to compel us to perform to laws that are destroying our businesses by exacting a fee, which is basically a protection racket, for what should be a right. Because, again, remember what I said in the beginning, infants can't hold title. If you can't hold title, you don't have any rights. Because the title to the thing, whether it be the land or whatever, your car, if you're the one that does not hold the title to it, or if you are the one that, in your own ignorance, went and registered the title under Roman civil law, then you just went to Caesar or Daddy and said, hey, Daddy, I have this document here. I have this thing, and I'm going to register the title with you, and then you are going to allow me to use the thing, but only in the ways of which you determine I should use it, and not other than that. And any time that you then go and use that property of which you have registered in a way that is not in accordance with how Daddy Caesar, or in this case, the United States Federal Corporation, determines that you should use it, you then get fined and feed for the use of your own property without you having knowledge of what's going on. Because you have registered that property, you are then subject to the statutes, acts, ordinances, and codes. And that's one of the big things that these guys will get into later and that we've covered multiple times in the VSOF classes, particularly in the classes regarding how to settle your estate. Okay, so last paragraph here. Instead, our absolute rights are now relative privileges, handed out like food in a concentration camp. Instead of being able to stand as an individual, and I would say as a free people, I wouldn't use the word individual, but I'll just save that for now. For what you believe, every special interest group has become our conscience. Laws and codes by the hundreds are feudalizing the will to produce from the soil of each person by making him pay for the failures, inefficiency, and greed of others, called limited liability. This is the entire Roman civil law system, an aspect of trusts and usufruct that the Jews of the time of Rome were destroying Rome by. And the same reason why the people of England, the Anglo-Saxons, said no to Roman civil law and did everything they could to fight off William the Conqueror, who was the filthy serpent seed-line piece of shit that came over into England that destroyed their common law. He got rid of the courts of 100, which was their precursor before there were such things as grand juries, because the Magna Carta came after William the Conqueror's takeover in 1066. And this war between the law of the people and the will of the people, if you will, and Roman civil law is the power struggle which we are still dealing with to this day. It is still the law of the filthy Roman civil law class, the filthy priest class. Okay, so to finish here. And still more laws are teaching citizens of all ages that someone else, Uncle Sam, is responsible for us from cradle to grave. Next section is Communalism raises its ugly head. The world has been filled with people with good intentions. Unfortunately, it seems that the majority of these well-intentioned individuals end up trying to convince the rest of us that their idea is best. The extreme in some countries results in a dictator, while in the United States, there developed democracy, with its ever-present special interest groups dictating the conscience of the masses. Yes, more problems are caused with good intentions become compelled performance. As many are aware, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. The result is always a loss of individual liberty of conscience. And as I believe it was Ben Franklin said, those who would exchange liberty for security deserve neither. And I believe it was Ben that actually said that. And he's right. Because if you're going to take a benefit and allow daddy to protect you, then you are going to owe him or it a duty or a debt, because literally that's the same word. Duty and debt, or if you go back into etymology, they're basically the same word. So if you have a debt, you owe a duty, or vice versa. In the beginning, America was a free republic with vast, unsettled wilderness open for anybody who had the courage to take up its challenges. Thus, America became the melting pot. Now, that term, by the way, is a term that was created by a Jew, which I have absolutely no respect for, because the idea of a melting pot is ridiculous. This came much, much, much later, this term, so that they could basically whittle away and try and destroy what white Europeans had created in this country. But I'll leave that for now. So thus America became, quote-unquote, the melting pot for religious and social ideas and experiments. Of the many social theories espoused throughout Europe then, there were three theories that fit the mold for America. All three were communitarian, basically communist, in nature. The first communitarian idea was set up by the religious sects made familiar by the Puritans, Quakers, Shakers, Rapites, and Zorites. I think that's how you pronounce that. The second communitarian idea was established by Robert Owen of Great Britain, who was born in 1771, and the third communitarian idea was of Charles Fourier of France, who was born in 1772. Both Owen and Fourier experienced the vast upheavals that accompanied the French Revolution from the onslaught of Napoleon. As a result of the slaughter, Owen and Fourier came up with communitarian plans to transform the crisis-warped society of the 19th century into a more humane order. In 1812, Robert Owen published a paper titled A New View of Society. His treatise discussed the formation of the human character, and he proposed ways of changing society from what he called the poor working classes. Quote, and this is from the book, quote, "The society of the poor were trained to commit crimes, the latter resulting in punishment. The rest of the population was instructed to believe, or at least to acknowledge, that certain principles are unerringly true, but to act as though they were grossly false. The result was filling the world with folly and inconsistency, making society a scene of insincerity and counteraction. In this state, the world has continued to the present time. Its evils have been and are continually increasing, and if we longer delay, general disorder must ensue." Close quote. Owen suggested that the governing powers of all countries should establish rational plans for the education and general formation of the characters of their subjects. This is where you get the Prussian education system from. Plans must be devised to train children, which would be taken from their parents at the age of 2 years. Now that's ridiculously young, but that's what this guy wanted to do. To prevent them, the children, from acquiring falsehoods and deception. And their labor must be usefully directed upon the communitarian view rather than the individual. So basically, we're going to turn you into a communist collective, and all that thou hast shall be mine. One of his favorite phrases, and this is Owen, was train the young collectively. I can give you a few other examples of that. The Jesuits say, give me a child until the age of 7, they will belong to the church forever. Same idea, different ideology, and different ultimate outcome as well. But same collective reasoning and same conditioning. So to continue, Owen deplored private property and he blamed the world's problems of ignorance on and selfishness on it. Well, he was probably not someone who had a lot of property. That's usually people who are poor want to take things from those who are not. Karl Marx is a good example of that. He also disliked commercial competition. He said, quote, it creates evil warfare. It exploits the many and gives to a few favorable individuals, which it is injurious to the masses. Close quote. Owen said, quote, without equality of condition, there can be no permanent virtue or stability of society. Close quote. Owen laid plans for the association of all causes of all nations with a purpose of, quote, founding as soon as possible communities of united interest. Close quote. I think everybody knows where this is going. Owen wanted to terminate the distinction between the rich and the poor, thereby creating a millennium. Owen proposed not only a national system of education, but also public works projects designed to guard the unemployed against the miseducative effects of enforced idleness. He was determined to set up a commune he envisioned, and he decided America was the ideal location. So he basically wanted to turn all of America into a communist commune, right? This was well before Marx. Owen's ideas were put to the test when he established his commune called New Harmony in 1825, and you can read all kinds of information about what happened to that place. In a letter to a Quaker leader, William Allen Owen reveals more of his ideals. Quote, the United States, but particularly the states west of the Allegheny Mountains, I'm not pronouncing that correctly, have been prepared in the most remarkable manner for the new system. The principle of union and cooperation for the promotion of all virtues and for the creation of wealth is now universally admitted to be far superior to the individual selfish system, and all seem prepared and are rapidly preparing to give up the latter and adopt the former. In fact, the whole of this country is ready to commence a new empire upon the principle of public property and discard private property and the uncharitable notion that man can form his own character as the foundation and root of all evil. Close quote. Yeah. Owen had a lot of problems from the start. Surprise, surprise. A major problem was poor production, obviously. The low level of production was caused by the lack of trained and competent foremen, supervisors, and skilled craftsmen, because why would they bother to skill themselves and learn and educate their own minds if they were not going to be able to keep the fruits of their own labor? Basic problem right from the beginning. His plan for equality was failing from the start because those who were trained could go to work in the open market and receive more pay. The first constitution that was drawn was short-lived because of a crisis of morale. The land of milk and honey that Owen promised did not materialize. Equality for all was running into trouble. Quote, no one is to be favored above the rest, as all are to be in a state of perfect equality, wrote a wife of one of the members of the society, but she said, quote, oh, if you could see some of the rough, unclothed creatures here, I think you would find it rather hard to look upon them exactly in the light of brothers and sisters. I am sure I cannot sincerely look upon these as my equals, and that I must appear to do it. I cannot either act or speak the truth. Close quote. Yeah. Social distinctions and religious differences had ever been as sharp as they became in the months following this brief experiment in forced premature social unity. As the problems mounted, Owen and the people disbanded one constitution and drew up a new constitution. In April 1827, the New Harmony experiment came to an end. However, Owen's influence in communitarianism continued to spread from the east to as far west as Texas. And I'm just going to leave that at this. So anyway, obviously it failed. So I'll just skip down to here. Even though there were other social experiments, Owen and Fourier had the greatest influence on the leaders of the U.S.A. and the corporate special interest groups. This influence figured heavily in the formation of the Limited Liability Act of 1851, in case you guys didn't even know there was such a thing. The Civil Rights Act of 1866, which is what you get after the Civil War, and the 14th Amendment in 1867, which was where they created their great democracy and forced everybody under it. It was these legislative acts that opened the door to the house called democracy that everyone moved into by ignorance. And so with that, we're coming up on 8 o'clock here. I know I got started a little bit late, but is there anything that anyone would like to comment about up until this point? And I'm going to save this here, turn the screen so we know where to come back to. And I also suggest that everybody do read this go ahead and read the rest of the document before next Saturday so that we can have a little bit more of a back and forth and a little bit more of a Q&A possibly at the end. But is there anybody who has any questions or would like to make any comments about what we have gone over so far? And by the way, this is a 54-page document, and we have only reached page 6. Owen just got a lot of influence because he got people to follow him. He wasn't, I don't believe he came, I'm pretty sure he didn't come from wealth, but I could be wrong. So you might want to, we might want to first start off looking up Mr. Owen, possibly on Wikipedia. I mean, as incorrect as some of the information on Wikipedia is, at least it would be true and correct as to his background. But he was, just as it says here, one of these few people that decided to come up with these communitarian ideas. This idea, it's like pre-communism ideas. And they tried it in America, and clearly it didn't work, nor will it ever work, for the basic reason as what I said, that you can't expect someone to give up the fruits of their own labor without ever seeing anything back for it, while looking at other people that are not doing the same labor and still getting the same amount of whatever. Well, Owen's, this is going way back before any of that happened. These times when Owen was doing this is in 1812. So this is just right after we set up the Republic. So there were little people like this, little pre-communists, if you were, roaming around right after the beginning of the Republic. Yeah, secret societies, that wouldn't surprise me a bit. It would not surprise me one single bit if Owen was part of some secret society, or even if he was possibly even Illuminati, because the Illuminati was set up in 1776 by Adam Weishaupt under the direction and order of the Rothschilds, who basically paid Weishaupt to create the Illuminati and to then infiltrate every other secret society on the planet, which of course they have now done. So does anyone else have any comments or questions about what we've covered tonight? If not, we can conclude here, and we will come back to where I saved this, and I'll make sure to save it now. And again, if you're listening to this online and you'd like to join the Vocational Science Freedom Gilded server and follow along in class, you can do so by going to the Vocational Science Freedom YouTube page and clicking on the VSOF Gilded server link. And also you can find all of the links in all of the show notes in all of the classes that we also have on Odyssey, because there are a lot of classes that we can't post on YouTube because of the sensitivity and the truth of what we're speaking. So make sure to join the Vocational Science Freedom on Odyssey as well. And if you would like a link to join the VSOF on Odyssey, I will make sure to put that into chat as well. And the link is very simply just the http odyssey.com/moneysymbol/invite/@VSOF:8. And if you use that link to join Odyssey, it helps out the Vocational Science Freedom to grow on that platform, which we hope will be a much larger platform after everybody realizes all of the censorship and stupidity that goes on over at YouTube. Okay, going over the Vocational Science Freedom online library. You can access this library if you're a Vocational Science Freedom member, and you can do so by going to the VSOF Gilded server and going to the prices of membership here under VSOF information, and the 1-year membership is 12 1-ounce rounds of 99.9% silver. Or if you want to become a lifetime member, which will include my entire hard drive of 25 years, meaning everything that I've ever collected, every class that I've ever done, every video that I've ever saved, that lifetime membership is 130 rounds. The price of silver is fairly low at the moment. It's only $19.14. So at the moment, it's a very good deal if you get in on it now before the price goes back up. So to continue with the library, Fruits from a Poisonous Tree, this is a very good and important book talking about court procedure, the fact that people have to come to court with clean hands. George Mercier's Invisible Contracts, this is an important one to understand what they're doing as far as the entire slavery system is concerned. And we'll cover a little bit of that in the U.S.A., in the republic that no one lives in. This document is from Judge Dale, and this is a retired judge who basically had had enough, and also, again, reiterates what's going on in the court system and says openly, yes, this is what they're doing to you and how. And then the Rivera document, dare call it treason. This is a good introductory document also into the treason of what they're doing. And there's certain aspects of which what they're doing is not treasonous because you have the right to enter into your own contracts. And basically all they're doing is offering you contracts and then you're going along with them. But there is another aspect of it regarding the public trust about taking a benefit. But again, we'll get into that when we start reading the document. And then I'm not going to go through all these, but there's other documents here as far as what your enemies, to know your enemies of freedom. So there's obviously Brave New World and some of these other documents, particularly Report from Iron Mountain, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. These are two internal documents that were basically leaked that show you what they're doing to you. And then also at the bottom, William Cooper's Mystery Babylon series transcriptions, meaning if you want to read all of Bill Cooper's Mystery Babylon series in transcript, I have it here. And now I'll just go through the rest of these folders. I won't open all of them up. So we have pleadings libraries for court cases. This is where it contains documents that you can use to go to court for everything from traffic cases to how to properly create a suit at law in a court of record. WINS, this is the folder that we have set aside for everything that's worked, because I like to amass knowledge and examples of things that work. Obviously, we don't want to be doing anything that does not work, and there's no reason for us to have to learn the same lessons that someone has already learned that came before us as far as how to fight this slavery system. The next one is complete law books. This one I will open up and show you because these books took me a long time to download, some of which I took off of archive.org, others I found in other places. But these whole entire book sets, these entire law book sets, are very lengthy, but they're very, very thorough. Wade's Actions and Defenses, this one's great because it has forms in it. This one also has pleading and practice forms. I try to use or find and put up the ones that have the forms so that people can get a good idea about how to create court documents if they wish to. I have some other treatises in here as well. I have most of all of Amger, which is a very, very difficult thing to get a hold of. This is an older version of it, but at least you have access to it. Encyclopedias of law and some other elementary treatises. And then the treatise folder, I don't have all of the treatises in here that I've ever collected, but I do have the most important ones. And then this section, the twos, all of the twos here deal with other books of law, but they're categorized. So banking dictionaries, English reference, law dictionaries, starting books for law. These are the ones that I suggest people look into first if you've never studied law. Books on maxims of law, common law, equity, law merchant, Roman civil law, Roman history. I put it right under here, even if it's not law books. I just wanted to put the Roman history next to the Roman civil law part. Maritime amnesty, military, and then of course I put the DoD Law of War Manual underneath because this Law of War Manual might very well come into being very important very soon if indeed there's talk about going after the cabal, if you will, or the deep state by using the DoD Law of War Manual. It's an interesting study, but it's very long. I don't want to get into it right now, but there's some people that have done some very good work within it and found some very important information that can be used against the deep state. Understanding venue, this describes what is the difference between, well, basically the term that they use in most state statutes, which is the term in this state. Many statutes are written where it'll say, basically, thou shalt not in this state do A, B, C, D. Well, when you go and understand what the term in this state means, it literally means in the District of Columbia or some other federal territory that the United States Federal Corporation owns. So those works to understand that are in here. Understanding citizenship, the state law folders, I will click on this real quickly. So I have not every single state, but I have a lot of different states in here that I've collected state law from. The United States Federal Corporation, an explanation of what it is. We'll also get into that into the reading tonight. Coroners and sheriffs, grand juries, land rights, IRS file, a notices folder. So this contains how to create notices if you need to write up a notice to someone or to a debt collection agency, and also contains debt letters that you can use also to basically knock out someone who's coming after you for a debt, particularly a third-party debt collector that's not the actual principal. The right to travel folder, this was actually something that we covered in the class, so that is actually available. This whole folder is available in the right to travel class that we did, which is available on YouTube. Books on notaries, the jurisdictionary law course. Now, obviously, this isn't the whole course. I just put some very important handouts from jurisdictionary because I tell everybody that what you need to do is go buy the jurisdictionary course and go through it step by step. And I'm not trying to take away at all from Dr. Graves' work. So I want people to support his work, and I want people to actually go and buy jurisdictionary. And for anybody that doesn't know, jurisdictionary is a law course that is focused in equity and statutory proceeding, which is obviously the system that they've put over the common law. However, that having been said, Mr. Graves does go into detail on how to navigate the equity system. And he does it very well and shows you how to win, even in equity, if you decide to go down that route or feel that you have no other choice but to do so, or if you have yet to study and learn how to file a countersuit in a court of record at law. But even if you do wish to file a countersuit in a court of record at law, learning everything that's in jurisdictionary will give you the tools to be able to write motions, write orders, and have a general good overview of how to create court paperwork, even though what you're going to be doing is you're going to be altering that paperwork to fit courts of record instead of courts of equity. So, and then I have the VSOF folders. These are the general folders of the Vocational Science of Freedom for self-awareness, self-defense, self-reliance. Self-governance is basically everything else that's in this folder, which is why I don't have a fourth folder here for self-governance. A VSOF book collection. This is non-law. It has various different things in it, a lot of science books. The 13th Amendment, what happened, 14th Amendment. And this is, by the way, the original 13th Amendment, not the one that freed the slaves, but the one that says that no one who holds allegiance to a foreign prince or principality can hold office in the United States, the original 13th Amendment. So that covers all the information of that. And then I have some timeline sort of document or folders here. What happened during the Civil War? This is everything that happened during the Civil War and dealing with Reconstruction. There's going to be a lot of documents in here that help explain what transpired. Things like the Lieber Code, documents taken directly out of the congressional record that were argued, many, many years later after the Civil War, talking about what had happened and the fact that the 14th Amendment was never properly ratified because the southern states were denied suffrage in the Senate, and so on and so forth. So this has everything to do with the Civil War and Reconstruction. So there's a lot of good books in there and interesting information. And then what happened in 1913, this would be the creation of the Federal Reserve and what happened around that time. What happened in 1933, this has everything to do with the New Deal and how they stole everything, basically how the Federal Corporation finally came over the top and took everything. And then we have the rest of these folders are just in alphabetical order. So everything about arbitration, audio folder, but I do not want to put everything that I've ever saved on audio in this folder because it allowed so much space on Mega. I do pay for Mega, so I do have a larger upload than just the free version, but again, it is obviously limited, and audio and video files would take up a tremendous amount of space. But if you want all of my audio and video files, again, you can become a lifetime member of the Vocational Science of Freedom, and you get my entire hard drive with it. Banks and banking, that's self-explanatory. Bonds and bonding, cases that courts are private and for-profit. This is a very specific thing which TJ gave to me regarding these private for-profit courts are private. They are not part of the state, and so therefore you can sue them in their own private capacity. And they have no ability to bring up 11th Amendment sovereign immunity. This folder is actually defunct. I can't seem to delete it, but anyway, the rest of the great works are down here in the collections, but I'll get to in a second. So COVID information, de facto versus de jure, the estate EIN paperwork. This is to get your estate EIN from the IRS. Family court folder, federal law, Freemasons, Templars, Vatican, and other evils you must learn about. This is basically everything to do with secret societies and all of that stuff. The health folder, history books. This is just general history books. The meme library, this is where I uploaded pretty much all of my memes, and I literally mean that. Use at your own risk, because I've collected a lot of memes that are, I would say, extremely offensive to some people. So just know that. General military folder, movies and documentaries. Again, this isn't very extensive because of the limited amount of space that I have on Mega. QTalks, this is an important program if you want to be able to chat with people and share documents over an encrypted platform. It's a peer-to-peer encrypted platform. So what happens is that if your computer and my computer are both turned on and we're both on QTalks, what we can do is we can exchange documents, and there is no file limit size when you're using QTalks. So theoretically, if you wanted to transfer your entire hard drive to someone else online, you could do it through QTalks, as long as both computers remained online and you did not interrupt the download. But obviously, that would take a long time. It'd probably take several days. In fact, in my case, it might take weeks or even a month. But the point is that there's no file limit with QTalks, which makes it a very useful program for sharing encrypted documents and other things that you want to completely keep off the radar. Next folder is taxes, income, property, and other. This one, New Deal. I actually transferred this today up into 1933, so I actually need to delete that. The 6 gifts, it's an aspect of biblical gifts. The gifts are something that I actually asked people who wish to become committee members. If you want to be a committee member, a committee chairman for any VSOF committee that we have running, I ask that people actually go through these 6 gifts and figure out which one you are, so that you can tell that to others and help share your gift. This next library is QC's entire Discord. When QC got shut down, and by the way, QC is one of our other gilded admins. When the VSOF got shut down on Discord, she had a very large Discord platform up, which was basically like a library. And so what she did was she archived the entire library, which you can just then copy and paste. And actually, you can just double click on it because these are all HTML files. And it'll take you to the books and the links of all of this information. Trials, this is kind of a general thing. Information on the United Nations. Video Vault, suggested watching. Again, this is limited because of file sizes. VSOF library upload folder. This is what I'm still working on to basically put into the rest of these folders. WikiLeaks file. And then this one, which is Zen's collection of other people's works over the years. This is where I have works by author. And so these get fairly extensive, like J. Edward Griffin and obviously some of these others, Henry Ford's and whatnot. They get very extensive as far as the amount of documents that are in here. So that's pretty much all of the VSOF online library. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for coming for tonight's VSOF Saturday Night Civics and Sovereignty class. We will continue the reading of this document, U.S.A., the Republic That No One Lives In, next Saturday at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. And until then, I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their weekend, and stay safe and stay sovereign.